Hello.
Hello.
Who's here? It's seen you in ages.
I know. Surprise. So we're on already.
We're on already.
Yes.
Namaste, everybody. Namaste if you're joining us online. Love happens in funny ways. Wait, I have to get plugged in, right?
Yes, please.
Like that. Funny ways. Talk, say something. Excuse us, 1 second. Technological imperatives. Can you hear me?
No.
No?
Can you put on
Not
channel?
happening?
What channel are you on?
I wish I could see it. I'm on A.
Say something.
A, say something. Testing, testing. The battery seems to be good.
Okay, good.
Yeah?
It was off. Just that.
Okay. I should try to do that beforehand, maybe. Or not. Okay. Love happens in funny ways. It happens when the usual way we usually are is not around. And so sometimes it just sneaks in and we have no idea because it's like the ego is in a blackout state. It's not there. And thank God for a moment the heart can open. But it can also happen when you're really fully aware of it and you notice that there is this moment where all the texture of suffering just falls away. And if you're with another person, it's like you look in their eyes and you don't know how to describe it, and it can really not be described, but it's actually incredibly easy to experience. Now, most people, we have this mythology in our country that we say love is rare and, why doesn't anyone love me? And I'm lonely and all of those kind of things. And that is just a little taste of the effort we make to keep ourselves out of the heart. To keep up the illusion that we are separated from love in some way, which could never be true because that's our deepest nature, always present. Always present, but where are we? We are in the past or the future, pure imagination. We roam around in imagination and we miss life, which happens now. Fully present, fully aware at all times, which we already are, but we don't notice because we have this overlay of thought that drags us into past and future. And then we have this opportunity when this odd thing happens that we just sort of, for a moment, forget to do that. And we drop down into the heart. It feels so wonderful because it's most true to who we are. And it can have all kinds of different shades to it. You know, it's like, it can be just a sense of peace that is very subtle. Or it can be this, you know, powerful falling in love, which is like a drop of your true essence, comes up from the heart, and a moment of that love happens with you and somebody else. And then very quickly it gets co-opted by our usual way of being, by the thinking machine. And it says, yeah, I love you, and that means that. Now fill in the blanks. I want you to be this way and that way, and this is how I want the script to go. And then if the script doesn't go the way we want it to go, which is like always, it never goes the way we want it to go, then the other script comes in, like, and you know, the other script, the essence of the other script, the script of unhappiness, is one simple little thought. And that thought is, I want this to be different. You with me? Hello, Abraham. I'm glad you're here now. Hi. And then we suddenly believe our thoughts again. And the magic of that essence is lost. So we have work to do to undo what's not real, to undo the way we fall out of the heart again and again. Like, did anyone have the thought people shouldn't be coming late just now? Did you have that thought? Yeah, right. Did anyone else have it? How could that be true? In the face that Abraham came in when he comes in, and who says that that was late? It was obviously exactly the time he was meant to come. How do I know that that's true? He came then. You see, this is all this stuff that we do in our heads and make ourselves unhappy. There's this little moment, oh, people shouldn't be coming late, or he's late. What's it, the wizard in his movies who said wizards are never late, right? He had that one right. Lord of the Rings. You're never late. Obviously, you must be a wizard.
My watch is made in China.
So, you know, this is just a little example of something that goes on in the mind all the time, over and over and over again. We have some thought of the nature of this should be different. And that is the descent into hell. Heaven is, this is absolutely perfect. And the truth is that every moment is absolutely perfect. Now, we label some moments good and some moments bad, and everything in between. And that's okay. as long as we don't believe our thoughts. So there are moments like, for instance, you get sick. Well, that's not as good as being healthy, okay? Practical reality. But when we then shun or hate or reject that moment of being sick, what happens? We're already sick, now we're piling a lot of suffering on top of that, right? So there may be natural pain, maybe you're coughing or wheezing or whatever, right? But then you hate that illness. That's a lot of extra suffering to pack on top of something that's just a natural occurrence that happens. And the same is true with other people. You know, somebody drives into your car. Now, don't expect yourself to be completely equanimous and just wonderful about it. Yeah, that's like not human. Get out of there and have a shit fit. But do you need to believe it? You see? Do you need to like really get into it?
Identify.
And that takes training because we do this stuff automatically. Now, we've talked a lot about the Hridayam, the innermost heart. You know, you can call it Hridayam, you can call it spiritual heart, you can call it self, you can call it Brahman, you can call it God, the presence of God in you, you can call it enlightenment, all the same thing. So there's many, many words to describe that innermost reality, love, peace, you know, the love and the peace that don't have an opposite. So there are many words to describe that in the innermost reality. And one of these words is the antaryami. This comes from Sanskrit, where they've studied this, where they've made it their business to study these inner realities, while we were busy making all the different kinds of screws and bolts, the 3,000 different kinds of screws and bolts you can buy in the hardware store. So the West was busy getting a handle on external reality, and we did pretty well, only we don't quite know what to do with it now, because we're just about to endanger the very life on the planet we have. But during that time, for thousands of years, the East has been busy exploring that inner reality, so they've come up with words and concepts and this incredible science of self-liberation, the science of the higher mind, the higher way of being. And that is a science because there was a community of sages, a community of people who qualified to interact in a discourse that was highly sophisticated about inner realities, about the truth and the wonder and the awe of our enlightened nature. So when somebody said all kinds of stuff, but they were off the wall, they were caught by this discourse amongst the peers. So this term antaryami means the inner controller. When I first heard that, I meant like, yuck, inner controller? That sounds like terrible. Like, because I had this idea of controlling being something that has to do with ego. And I've just learned a few things that this is not really the way it is with this innermost reality. Because this innermost reality, we talk about it as innermost, but where is it not? It's the presence of God, the presence of truth in us. Where is it not? It is woven into the fabric of all of reality. There can be no universe outside of that fundamental truth, that fundamental love. So the inner controller, the antaryami, is that aspect of the self that is in charge of everything that happens. It controls everything that happens, but there's no ego controlling anything. Rather, it is love that controls everything, because that innermost reality is love. So what does that mean? It means that when you look at each individual and each of our relationship to the world, to this amazing reality we're part of, then that inner controller out of love means that everything that happens to us comes out of that ultimate reality, out of that ultimate love. And therefore is designed, perfectly designed for each one of us in this miraculous way to bring us back to our enlightenment, to God, to ourselves. So that's very clear to us when we're having an epiphany, some wonderful reality opens up, some great insight. We know that's taking us in the right direction. It's easy to see. But what about the times when reality isn't so friendly? When there's something going on that really bothers us, that pushes our buttons like crazy. So let's make it practical. Go to something like that. That happened in the past. Let's learn from our own past. And this is going to be something completely different for everyone here. Go to a memory of something that was really unpleasant. And then ask yourself, how did that help me on my journey to enlightenment? How was that for me and didn't happen to me? How was it perfectly designed by a loving universe to help me with this next step in my growth? Now, it may be easy for you to see that with some realities, some past events, where you've actually learned the lesson, where you overcame this particular hardship and it made you strong. You conquered a particular fear and you realized that your nature was courageous or loving. You had a specific relationship issue and you learned how to deal with it and no longer be bothered by the same pattern. And maybe some of you picked a memory where it wasn't clear yet how you benefited from it. Then it simply means you have some more work to do there. Like, ask yourself, how did this benefit me? Or if it's happening now, how is this benefiting me? And when you look deeply, you will always find it. You will find that everything serves us, and don't believe what I'm saying. Test it out. Only when that becomes real for you is it of any value. How could we have become who we are without exactly the kind of challenges that each one of us had? But when this stuff happens, we just object greatly. And that objection does a number of things. First of all, it gives us more suffering. Some experiences are naturally painful, like if you get a cold. It's not pleasant. But then you pack suffering on top of it. I hate when that happens. So that's the first thing that's not necessary, right? So then when we have a negative attitude about something difficult that's happening, we close ourselves to the learning that could be there. And we make that learning much more difficult. The resolution of whatever is going on that's off. It's like when you gripe in your head because you have a flu, what happens to your immune system? I mean, this is just where our body teaches us. The immune system goes into the basement. Right? And it makes it so much harder for us to learn the lessons that we're being handed. And you know, we call them problems. Well, the word problem is a problem because it means it's a problem. So we can call them challenges. That's a little bit better because when we have a challenge, we also this implied that you can overcome a challenge. But when you know that you can overcome a challenge, then you realize, oh, the challenge was actually an opportunity for some learning. And when you've accomplished that learning, you realize, oh, that was actually a gift. So our challenges are our gifts. But if we gripe and grumble and object or indulge, which we can also do, it just makes everything so much harder in a completely unnecessary way. So the antaryami is this aspect of the divine self that is in control of everything. But it is controlled or created, and it comes through us through the agency of love. Love is what brings that to us. And again, I don't ask you to believe any of this because it'll be worthless for you. But look at your life and look how you've been guided. Now, if you have a problem with an aspect of how you are, how you experience yourself, there's some work to be done here. I shouldn't be XYZ. I'm not blank enough. Those thoughts can be two things. They can be an inspiration for you to overcome a pattern, or they can be bogging you down. The reality of it is that you are the way you are. And how else could you accomplish this journey to yourself? As someone else? The one you think you should be? Or you'd rather be? I don't think so. This journey is custom designed for you. And we're just sitting here trying to make it a little bit easier. Because we're all specialists in how to stand in our way. So if it's all created out of love, if we just dare to give this thought a chance. And yeah, like I said, it's easy to understand with the pleasant parts of life. And that's great, that's where we start. But we don't really understand it unless we can also see it about the difficult parts of life. That we're being led in this life through a string of experiences, one after another. We label them good and bad, easy and hard, you know, pleasant and scary, and so on. But they all add up to this path, to this awakening. This, when the density of who we think we are usually just sort of takes a little break and something can open. And we can cultivate that. That's what heart sourcing is all about. We can both cultivate that And we can systematically remove the obstructions that get in the way. And we can relax into us right now, who we are now. Got any problems with who you are now? Anything making you unhappy? If so, that's where your work is. To see through that, to free yourself of that part of you that needs help. That's why it's suffering. But let's just take a break from that stuff. And just come here, just be you. And come into that beautiful heart. And it's really just a process of relaxing into it. And if the mind is still going, you can just say, thank you, not now. And come into the heart. Let yourself come into that place. And there are ways to anchor your awareness in the heart. Breathing in and out of that deepest place in you. Or letting a mantra repeat itself in your heart. And all these methods take you toward the heart, deeper and deeper. And then the point comes when you're just there and you're ready to dissolve in this space. And then you just let go of the vehicle. Like they say, when you cross a river, you have a canoe. So the mantra or the breath is like a canoe. You're going from this world of aggravation into the peace of the heart. With your canoe, rowing over there, rowing into the heart. And when you get there, you don't carry your canoe with you. You just leave it behind. So when you come into the heart and that space just kind of is ready to welcome you and to dissolve any worry, any stress, then just let it take you. So come into that space of the heart. And if the mind is still operating, that's okay. Just let it do its thing. And meanwhile, you, the true awareness of who you are, let yourself descend into this amazing generosity of the heart. This great place of peace. And then take a deep breath. As you exhale, open your eyes again. So sometimes that word antaryami is translated as the knower of all hearts. So what would it be that knows all our hearts? Everyone's heart, everyone's being. It is that awareness in us, that awareness that transcends our individual differences. And it's just awareness itself. So there's one awareness that knows who and what we are in each one of us individually. And that awareness is part of a great awareness. The Guru is that great awareness that knows the truth of all hearts, really the truth of all things. And it is that awareness in all things that guides the reality of each one of us. And that awareness is both universal and vast, but also absolutely caring for everything that happens to us. Like a mother who has just absolute attention to her child. Absolute attention, absolute kindness, absolute compassion. And this is how the universe relates to us. This universal reality, this great mind that creates it all, which we sometimes call God. That reality, that vast reality, is not separate from us. But it cares for us with this absolute, minute attention. And we can all learn to attend to life with that same absolute, minute attention that comes from the heart. That is possible for all of us. It's the call that you've all heard in some way. It's the capacity to love ourselves. And love ourselves is not separated from anything else. You look cold. Over there, sitting in the See, I didn't think just now to combine that, what I was talking about and what I was doing. It just happened. I had no clue that was actually just that.
In that.
Any questions, comments, contributions? I know, this is a bummer when you're in that space and then somebody asks you to talk. Understand that. But we're doing this mad thing for a reason, because when you start to speak from that space, and obviously I'm not asking you to come down from that space or out of that space, I'm asking you to see if some words, something, some speech manifests here, because when you speak from that space, it makes it more real from you. You know, we go into this loving space and we're not used to it. We're used to our professional lives or that kind of stuff. You know, that's easy for us. We're not used to being in that depth inside of us. So when you can allow words to come from there, it makes it more real to you. It allows us to function in that space. Because the idea is not to go there every once in a while. The idea is there to learn to live there. So, yes, ma'am.
Can awareness be aware of itself?
Absolutely. That's what we call the witness mind, right? So, let's say something happens to you that you really don't like. The kind universe doesn't seem so kind and it's pushing your buttons, right? So then you have a reaction, like let's say you get angry. Now there's two ways to get angry, at least. One is you get fuming angry and you mean it, right? That's a lot of pain. And then there's the way you get angry because that's an old pattern that's still in there, and you observe that. You observe yourself getting angry. There's actually three ways of getting angry. So the second one is like your awareness is watching your awareness get angry, the ego's awareness get angry, right? That's a powerful way to undo that pattern. When you can manage that, especially with anger, it's difficult. You can do it with all emotions, all reactions that you have. What we usually do is we try to repress it, right? Well, if you try to repress something, you give it more power. But if you can let yourself be angry, but maintain as much as you can that space of the witness, oh, here I am, and I'm like fuming angry. Well, you're probably not going to express it as much as when you're really identified with it, right? So you're likely to create less damage or create less of a ricochet effect, right? But the anger is still there. So maybe there's like that bad feeling inside and you know it's not really smart to just let it out, but sometimes even that, we can watch it. Now, when you do that, especially with anger, this can lead to a real burning inside. It's just like you're burning up. You restrain yourself as good as you can from just letting it out and creating more trouble, but the anger is still there and you're just burning. Well, let it burn up. We have this expression, burning the seeds of karma, right? When you have a seed and you roast that mother until it's black as charcoal, no new life is going to come from that. In other words, you kill the pattern, right? You dissolve the pattern by letting it burn. So that's awareness of being angry without the suppression of it, without running away from it, without indulging it either.
Where's it located?
What? Your anger?
The awareness.
We can say, that's metaphorical language, we can say it's the awareness of the heart, but it's not really, it doesn't really have a location. That space we call the heart, we can access it here in a physical location in the center of our being, but it's really beyond time and space. It's the reality out of which time and space come, and everything in it. So yeah, we can access it here, but to say sort of in a literal space, it is here, that's not real. To, that witness of whatever is going on is the witness of whatever is going on. So it doesn't have a location per se. Then there's a third way of being angry, which is when you consciously use the power of anger. Because what is that good for? Why did God or reality create this thing called anger?
To straighten up things that are in need to.
Exactly. It changes things. So there's these stories of my guru getting angry. Ramdas has a whole long story of, one time he saw him like screaming at somebody. And he's like, oh my God, he betrayed me, he's not the real one. And all of that stuff came up in his mind, right? And he had to go through this for a while. I had an experience with him where he was sitting on his little platform he was sitting on, and there was a Western devotee sitting right here. Her name is Krishna Priya, and she was just incredibly in love with him. She was incredibly in love with that which he was. And she had her hand on his knee, and then I saw him caressing her hand with this absolute gentleness he was capable of. And it's just watching that movement was just like they were making love in the most incredible way. And then as this was going on, something else happened. And an employee of the ashram had been caught stealing potatoes or something, I don't know what. And the man was brought in front of Maharajji, was standing like at a distance, and Maharajji let him have it. And got really angry and proceeded to throw him out of the ashram with the dictum to never come back in this life, which was a big deal because everyone up there in the mountains kind of knew who Maharajji was. And he ran a tight ship. So as he was doing this, we were all sitting there hoping that none of this anger would hit us, right? It was just a really powerful manifestation. And then in the middle of all this hollering, I noticed that this lovemaking had never stopped or faltered, even for the slightest moment. So what happened was that he was capable of using that power of anger for someone's purification, to help someone. He was manifesting that power that I was just talking about when I mentioned the Antaryami. Sometimes the universe gets to us that way. Somebody may just get really furious with you. Imagine that for a moment. Now it's really hard in the moment to have any kind of idea what this is good for. But it's going to be good for something. So what you can do is just like, maybe you're falling apart, or maybe your old abandonment or betrayal or abuse issues come up. So, okay, that's still what's necessary. But then afterwards, and sometimes maybe increasingly even while it's happening, you can look at that and you can say, oh, there's my old pattern, just being lived out in this interaction with this other being, right? And then you become conscious of your own awareness, right? And it's a powerful and fast way to overcome these old hang-ups and patterns that bother us.
When you said that this seed needs to be burned, you're talking about this, that consciousness and that awareness is the only thing that burns it, or?
Yeah, the allowing of, the question was, what does it mean when the seed gets burnt? That was not exactly the question, but it's the gist of it, right? When the seed gets burned. the seed of karma, what does that mean? It's basically your tendency, your inherent tendency to fall into the same pattern again and again, the same groove, right? So why do you fall into the same pattern again and again? Because you're not conscious of it. No one consciously creates suffering for themselves, right? So you fall into that thing, and then it just deepens the groove because you suffer through it again, right? Then you scramble out, you get okay again, then it happens again, right? So how do you close that groove? How do you create a conscious way of dealing with certain types of situations? By allowing that to happen, but staying as conscious as you can. And you can do that with a replay as well. You know, remember a time when you got hurt or angry or reactive to some situations, right? Go back to that and walk your way through that, remaining aware. Oh, so first this happens, and then that happened, and then that happened. Okay, so you walk your way through that. So the next time this happens in real life, somebody else gets in your face or something like that, you are just a little bit more conscious, a little bit less able to or capable, prone to just believing the whole drama of it. A little bit more able to see through it, right? And that's how you burn the seed of the karma, the seed of that pattern. And at the same time, create a conscious way, a new conscious way to deal with that type of situation.
I had a situation actually happened Sunday where I got really mad, and because of the coming here and your teachings, I was like, but my reaction was, of course, the first thing I yelled at this person, and then later, like, and as I'm sitting and brooding on it, because of course I hung up and I'm brooding on it, and I was like, I started thinking, and then I could put myself in his shoe and like see what I was doing. But my question to you was, so it helped a lot, but I still lashed out at this person. But my question was, like you said, that the second way of like dealing with this anger is to just sit and brood in it?
No, not brooding.
Okay.
Be aware of it.
Okay.
Brooding on it is like your ego is like really involved, and you believe your own drama, and you suffer for it. Deserves her right if I'm feeling like crap.
I initially felt like that, but then I started like thinking, oh no, there's a reason, because I was like, okay, this is happening for me to learn something.
Yeah. See, this the short formula that Byron Katie came up with. Everything happens for us and not to us. It's just so great to have this just in a few little words, and then we can use them on whenever we think something's happening to us, right? And so, okay, wait a minute, how is this happening for me, right? Okay. So now you hung up the phone, and you're still stewing in it, right? And then awareness starts setting in.
Yes.
That's when you start closing that groove, right? It doesn't go at once. We have to do. Now, how many times have you fallen for that kind of anger, right? Yeah. And that's just this life, right? So, don't expect this to be gone by 2 or 3 repetitions. We have to practice that to not get caught in our old patterns. But compared to the infinite amount of times it takes to even try to get over it by resolving it on the same plane, like, oh, he did this and that. Get yourself on a different level of awareness. Look at it from here. Oh, here I am, and this is the space where you're actually free of it, where you're aware of it, right? And now you're watching yourself get angry, okay? So our original way of doing it is like repress it, or escape from it, or indulge, and we're really in it, right? Or we're complaining about it. Yeah, people are just really a pain in the ass, and they're really, Well, how good does that have working for you?
But so how do you deal with the anger in the moment? Because I did that. I was aware of it.
Have you ever heard of open attention?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So what you do with the anger, you find where it hurts in the body.
Okay.
where the discomfort is, where the stress is in the body. And let yourself be with it. It's the same thing. Now we're looking at the manifestation of a body sensation, right? The
Yes.
anger as a body sensation. So maybe you have this like burning thing here, or this, some like clawing at your throat. Yeah, so realize, wait a minute, I don't have to escape from it. I don't have to complain about it. I don't have to hate it and push it away. This is a part of me that needs help. That's the big switch in the mind, right? Part of me that needs help. At that moment when you realize that a positive, compassionate approach, conscious approach becomes possible, which is not possible when we're just blindly reacting. And with that, we can really see changes very quickly. Very quickly doesn't mean instantaneously. It's like, we're in the instantaneous culture. Right? If it hasn't happened yesterday, it's too slow. We have to practice this being, this loving, conscious being that we are.
There is another way of getting angry that I found with me last night.
Okay. You're here first.
So as I was seeing myself getting into the anger and feeling it in my body, really raging and noticing my actions, I was still doing them, but I was observing that I made the choice of getting angry. So I was becoming aware and still letting the anger go. So it wasn't a blind fall for the anger. There was the witness, and I was like, oh, but I still felt the need physically to express the anger by slamming into the door.
Well, but that's perfect. That was that second way, where you allow the anger in whatever way it still has to manifest. But you're remaining conscious even while it's happening. That's a powerful way of overcoming the old hang-ups. Overcoming anger in this case. Powerful way. So, in this case, it still had to manifest, but you were so right there with it. You slammed the door and you remained conscious. Fabulous.
I had an experience with you over this last week where I was working with you and I was talking about, the work and all of your skills. And I'm like, well, the work, sometimes, I'm so into heart sourcing and open attention that I just pull myself into my heart, and that feels great. And so Ramgiri gets up, we get up, he leaves, he comes back with a glass of muddy water, and this is, or cloudy water, and this is after we've been talking for a while, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, I still feel there's a little muddiness going on there. And I said, okay. So we had our session, I went home, and lo and behold, like what I feel, and the way I would describe heart sourcing for me is I go into my heart and I feel like the gray matter in my brain, I funnel it into the lightness of my heart. And I thought, oh my gosh, and then it was like this gate flooded open and all the thoughts just started going like a mile a minute. And I went and I sat down and I made the time and I did the work, and the clarity that brought, and this is similar to me in this situation where I wasn't allowing my thoughts to be there at all. I was just going into my heart, and that is another way of avoidance.
This is what we call the I know mind.
So they all have to be used, all the skills.
The I know mind knows how it is. Yeah, it's like, I know how this is. I know I'm just going into the heart. I don't really need the other skills because, it's just, and this is a really great way for the ego to survive. This is the I know mind, and there's always ego involved in this I know. So in other words, that's ignorance talking, right? Now, the don't know mind is very different. The don't know mind is also known as the beginner's mind, the learner's mind. It's like you're open. You don't have anything to defend. You're just ready to learn from everything that happens. You know, and the I know mind is the one that gets bogged down into the drama. It's like, I know he shouldn't have done that. Just for instance, you know. But if he did it, of course, it means he should have done it because he did it. Reality really doesn't make any mistakes. The mistakes happen in our interpretation and what the interpretations then create inside of us, which is a really difficult world.
So in some way, oh, I'm sorry.
Good. Oh, I didn't see you. Okay. Have your hand up.
When we yell somebody for some reason.
When we what?
Yell somebody with our anger.
Yeah,
We are
that's
helping them in some way, like.
No, that's not our concern.
Yeah,
No.
it's how I feel after that.
Our concern is us and our purity of mind and purity of action and purity of heart, right? So when you look at a master like my guru, yeah, you can say, yeah, you see that this is happening, but this is not a person doing it, right? This is a difficult thing maybe to understand. It's like when a master sits there and gets angry at somebody, there's nobody home. This is an action that is evoked by the situation of this man who stole something. That's where that anger really comes from. That's the need for that correction was there. And therefore the anger could arise in the guru. Do you see the difference? It's not like the guru said, well, this guy needs some straightening out. Not happening like that, right? So when we can be that empty, then we're able to, or that loving, then we're able to use anger in the right way. But the point is that there's not an ego there doing it, right? Does that answer your comment there? A little bit of an example is like when a mother, you know, her child runs into traffic, and the last second she snatches him back, and he could have gotten killed. And now her whole impulse is just to hug him and to be expressing her relief that he's safe, right? But she knows that that would not teach him anything. So instead of that, she does something very different that she does not feel. She's not angry, she's just relieved. But she knows I have to be very stern with him now. Say, don't you ever run out into traffic again. So he can learn that, you see. It's similar. This is like the power of love, giving her the right message of what to do there. But it's not that she is angry at all.
So I've become very aware of a pattern that I have, which is suffering for other people. But I know that that's not supposed to be my business because it's hopeless. I understand that part, but I still can't help that suffering. So how does that relate to what you're teaching here? Because it's not.
Well, see, in order to know we're alive, we have to feel. When we feel something, we feel alive. And for many people, it's like the worst thing to imagine to be just sort of in a totally emotionless blank state, right? So because of that, we create a habit of making ourselves suffer over somebody else's suffering. So when let's say Durga gets sick and she's just like really miserable, right? How am I more help to her? when I get really miserable about her misery, and it's just, oh, it's just so terrible, and I feel for you, and it's just, oh, I can't stand it, you know, and with that I become increasingly dysfunctional. Or when I say, oh, she's suffering, what can I do? Stay clear. Act, serve, be there for the other person, right? Now, which version of me would you want by your bedside if you're sick? Right? It's pretty clear, right? So, but it's, again, it's an old habit. So you see yourself, first of all, you don't suffer the other person suffering. There's no way you can know what it feels like to be them. You create suffering in you. You make yourself suffer because it somehow seems to you that that somehow must connect you with the other person, and then you can commiserate together, which is like, you know, great source of friendship. Oh, now we're just so miserable together. Right? That's not a good friendship to have. You know, and this is extremely common. People love to sort of suffer together about the same stuff, they think. Right? But it's all just stuff that we make up in the mind and then feel. But each one of us separately. Right? So when Durga suffers, I'm very happy to know that it's her turn and not my turn.
Can you believe that? That I don't understand.
And it certainly may be my turn to try to figure out what I can do for her. You see, that's my job then at that moment.
I think at that point it becomes my suffering, because sometimes I don't know what to do or how to help or how to.
Well, yeah, so then figure it out. Now, if somebody has an illness, Google. He's always there, your best friend. You know, you may find out some things, or you call somebody who knows these situations. What can be done, right? Take her to a doctor or whatever. Just understand that it's useless for you to create. It's worse than useless for you to create your own suffering over somebody else. But we don't even know that, because we do it so automatically that we think, well, of course I have to suffer if she's suffering. No, you don't. It's a wrong connection to make with someone. And it's not even a connection. It's your own delusion creating that suffering.
But isn't also part of humanity to feel some suffering when we see the raw suffering in someone? Isn't that part of compassion as well?
Or
And
it might
then
just be that.
by staying clear in the mind, I understand this because for me it's very hard. Like when I see an animal suffering, forget it. I lose it. So I can see the suffering in this being, and I can see myself feeling the suffering, but then I can stay clear in my mind, so I know how to act, perhaps, if I can in that moment.
So I think there are stages of that. It's like there's one stage when we see an animal, pick an animal, because it's a good metaphor or a good experience, because we all have had times where we saw an animal suffering and we felt nothing, right? I mean, I think probably most people are familiar with that, where you just like feel disconnected. So then the next step is to actually realize that there's suffering going on. It's like, for me, I came from Europe to the United States, and when I realized that in this culture, hunting and fishing is considered a sport, that was very strange for me, because it's not a sport. In my culture where I was raised, it's hunting or fishing. Mm-hmm. And you're aware that you're killing something or hurting something. But I've met fishermen who are like yanking those hooks out of the mouth of the fish and then throwing them back because that's their sport, and have absolutely no sense that there may be some suffering involved in this creature. that's a coarseness and an unfeelingness that is very problematic in my understanding, right? So the next step to that is to really see that there's suffering going on, and that may evoke some suffering in you. So nothing wrong with that, but you're dealing with the next step after that, because you see that you create unnecessary suffering in you, right? So then you say, well, you know, when I really look at the suffering I create in me about someone else's suffering, then I realize this is not helpful. And there's a lot of people who are sort of stuck in this place of, oh, the poor children that are starving in this world, it's just so horrible, I can't stand it, it's giving me so much pain, I can't even think about it. And you know what? They do nothing. That's not helpful. If you have a problem with children starving in this world, and there's 5,000 children, I hear, are dying of hunger every day in this world, if this gives you pain, do something about it. Save one child. Everyone can do that. That's a sane approach, you see? But just to get stuck in pain, what, you know, how is it better when there's two people in pain compared to one person in pain? One person's bad enough. Somebody had a hand up over here? Okay, Leslie?
It was kind of, I guess, like what you were talking before with witnessing your anger, witnessing the car accident or whatever. It's like witnessing the pain from that place of love and clarity and not indulging in it. So like having compassion, but not indulging in the pain of it, kind of a thing.
Well, but you don't indulge in the pain
about?
of it, you create the pain of it.
But I'm saying for us to not go into that place,
Yeah.
that's that line of just standing in that place.
And I'm not saying this is easy either.
Yeah.
You know, I was born in the shadow of the Holocaust. There goes that old story again, right? But the suffering that was created there, that was in front of my eyes all my childhood, right? Because it was not hidden. This society actually dealt with it. And dealt with it rather well. And still is dealing with it. But as a child, the suffering, this horrendous suffering that was created on purpose, was just constantly in front of my eyes. And I could not, it took me many, many years to be able to, how should I say that, to free myself of my suffering about that suffering, so I could be of use. Because as long as I was paralyzed by that suffering, I was paralyzed. So that happens to a lot of us, and we have to, again, this is something we have to have compassion for in us, if that describes you, that you have a way of suffering about people suffering. That is a certain stage of compassion. That is important. I'm talking, you know, it's like, there's a lot of people who can see suffering and just don't give a damn and just walk on, right? So then suffering about suffering is definitely a step in the right direction, but we're talking now about the next step. Be of use.
I remember seeing a picture on a newspaper that really sort of changed my life, because it was a picture of a Somalian kid, and the photographer that took the picture won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yes, I see.
And it was a poor child left behind in the desert by the family because they were so weak of starvation that they couldn't carry him over anyway, so they just left him. And it really marked me, and I said, my gosh, you know, I was kind of suffering also. And I said, what can I do for him? Nothing. But something happened in my mind and my spirit, I guess, and said, well, I cannot do something for him there, but I could do something for someone here.
Yeah, exactly.
And volunteering was a great way of channeling that energy into something positive. And I found an example in this country where an elderly gentleman had no food, and I said, how could this happen in this rich country? So it happens next door to you.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. You know, and it's a question of how awake are we that we can do something. You know, we see the pictures of the starving children in Africa. It's like sort of the archetype of that suffering, right? And it paralyzes us. Oh, this is terrible. I can't see it anymore, right? And there, you know, down the block is a family where the kids have to go to school to get a lunch. And if school is out and there's vacation, they don't eat. It's down the block from everyone.
There's a question. Rosemary. Let me select the first.
Hi, Rosemary.
She says, with a visionary innovator like an Einstein, how do you filter out the ego-based voices from those that come from the antrayami?
I don't know what that has to do with Einstein, because we're,
Well, he's just putting an example, but let me
Yeah.
repeat the question maybe again.
yeah, that would be good.
With a visionary innovator like an Einstein, how do you filter out the ego-based voices from those that come from the antrayami?
Well, I can only speak about it for us. It's a matter of becoming still, that distinguishing between what is real and what is not, what is the voice of our true self and what is the voice of the ego. When we're not still, when there's this constant cacophony of the ego talking, then, you know, that'll be all there is. But when there's stillness, it's actually very clear. Because there's a feeling attached to either one that is very different. The ego has an inherent sense of insecurity about it. Now, when I say that, I'm very aware that a lot of people have that kind of an ego, right? That's not stillness talking. That's the ego really making grandstand. But when you get quiet, then you can find the places of insecurity that would have you assume that kind of power kind of voice, for instance, right? But then there can be that power voice that's actually the voice of the self. But that will not feel shaky, that feels absolutely clear. When you know what you're saying, when you know what you're doing, and this is not just the case with some saints or sages, anybody can have that experience. Sometimes you're just aligned with your true being and you know what you stand for and you know what you're doing and you're completely clear. That's the voice of the self. Whether that happens in the privacy of your quiet meditations or in full engagement with the world. So we all have that capacity to have the sense of what is true for us. And the basic thing here is that when we come from the ego, there's some kind of stress in there. There's something not quite kosher. To be aligned with your truth is another way of saying the same thing. You can be aligned with your truth, and your actions and your being feels right. It feels true. Or you can guess at it. When you feel yourself guessing at it, or when you feel like off anyway, become still. Become still, and becoming still is sort of one step closer into the heart, toward yourself, toward that love that is there just waiting for you to discover it. It has been there always. Nobody can be alive, nobody can exist without the presence of that great love inside of us. But we don't experience it because we're busy otherwise. We're busy with our hang-ups or our ego scheming and our drama. But that love has been waiting and waiting and waiting. And this is the nature of love. It does not force itself. So it's up to us to find that love. And it's the same thing as saying finding yourself. And that love is profound. That love is the source in you. That love is the source of all love. All love. So we're free to embrace or to experience as much of it as we want, as we can. I did a thing just a day ago, 2 days ago. I was on YouTube, and I typed in the importance of love. And I was surprised to find basically nothing. Now, I don't know if this is a representative sample of what's going on in our culture, but it might be. We're not aware yet that love, that heart is so important in us. But I think I have the sense that we're at a tipping point where that people are going to become much more aware of that pretty quickly now. Why? Because we need it. Otherwise we're just gonna eradicate ourselves. So that gives us a little motivation, hopefully, in the right direction. You said you had some kirtan up your sleeve. Can we get that set up? Very nice. You know, when we sing kirtan, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is this devotional singing that comes from India. But it doesn't have to be that. Singing anything with devotion has the same effect. It transports us into this awareness that we all share. This awareness that is the antaryami, the knower of all hearts in all of us. And that can happen without words or song. It can just happen. What happened? Okay. It can just happen when. It can happen whenever there's an opening to love. Here, just sit up here. I guess I said my part. Now it's kirtan time.
The words are very simple, and we're going to evoke that power of determination that cuts or help us really deal with that repetitiveness of gross impurities or patterns. So the deities who help us deal with that are Kali and Durga. Right? So this is who we're calling upon right now.
Now, let me just add one thing. What does that mean, deities? For crying out loud, we're living in the 21st century. What it means, what these deities are symbolically, they're parts of us, they're parts of our already enlightened mind that we may not know fully. And so we have a picture. And that picture, because of the aliveness of life itself, that picture is more than a picture. It's an actual being that can interact with us, but it's not separate from us.
The words are Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Kali,
Jaya
Mata Durga.
Jayamata Durga.
So that's the first part. And then the second part, Kali, Durga, or Durge, Namo Namah.
Kali Durga Namo Namah.
And Namo Namah is, this is not me, this is not mine. So we're offering that anger, we're offering that pattern that is not mine, is not me, to that force, to take it away. Right? Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durga, 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 Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durga, Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durga, Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durga, 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 Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Kali Durga, Namo
Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durge, 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 Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durge, 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 Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durge, 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 Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Jaya Mata Kali, Jaya Mata Durge, 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 Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah. Kali Durge, Namo Namah.
Namaste. Thank you for joining us.